Welcome to Command Shift Left, the podcast that helps you navigate the treacherous waters of the software development, ops, and security world while also diving into the hot current trends in the industry. Join myself, developer Philip, our co-host Orvice.
Hey audience!
As we battle through hilarious real-world stories, pro tips and hacks for navigating your way around developer security, learning about our Shift Left life, and life stories that have saved our ass.
As with every episode, you have myself, Orvice. Joining with me today as a co-host is Gabriel, who's our DevRel in Permanent IO. And we have two amazing guests for you. First one is Joel. Joel, would you care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Joel Beasley, and I'm the host of the Modern CTO podcast. We get to interview all sorts of crazy people and things, from resurrecting woolly mammoths to astronauts that just got back from space to the creators of the internet. And that's what we do.
Awesome. I had the good fortune of being a guest on the Modern CTO. Amazing episodes and also good ROI. So I highly recommend. And also we have Tim Chen. Tim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, I'm Tim. I'm started a little VC fund called Essence VC, and also have a podcast called Open Source Startup Podcast. We interview a lot of open source founders so far. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And so without any further ado, let's jump to our facts. And the first fact for today is my fact. And my fact is that if you type in import this in Python, you get a poem. You get the Zen of Python, which has a lot of cool tidbits into it. One of my favorite parts of it is explicit is better than implicit, and beautiful is better than ugly. And it's essentially an Easter egg that you have as part of a programming language. And Easter eggs have been part of developer culture from really the early days, since like the 60s when we were just starting to build computers. One of my favorites there is an Easter egg called HCF or HCP, which is an instruction in assembly for certain architectures that is called halt and catch fire. It's essentially a command that you can give the computer to just fail. It started out as a joke, and then when people discovered in some other architectures that there are, by mistake, actually opcodes that you can give the machine that will actually cause it to malfunction, it became kind of a common thing and became widespread. So this kind of keeps me thinking, like, we are always finding Easter eggs in games, in movies, in shows, in software that we create. As the developers ourselves, when we're building, when we're working for a company, when we're building a startup, when we're building a product, should we add Easter eggs? Is that something that we should do? Maybe we used to do a lot more of it. There's still a bit of it, but maybe you should do more. What do you guys think?
Well, if you've made any awesome ones for Call of Duty, just DM me directly, because I want them.
Yeah, it's funny. I worked on games before. I actually worked on a game studio. We worked on top grossing iPhone games, and I joined 343 Studios to work on Halo 5. And, I was more of a back-end developer. I'm not really the game core developer, but I worked on a game as well. And you always remember, it's like a cultural thing, right? When you build a game, you got to have Easter eggs. You got to have something to be able to talk about, because that's how they identify game developers as having their own personality into the game, right? And also how you can actually advertise some fun stuff for people to go discover and find things, because beyond just like the typical, play more content or replay the levels because you can try different classes. The Easter egg is sort of like, the industry is known for it. If you don't do it, it just feels like you didn't finish the game, And like maybe one day when we're building developer products, maybe it's similar. Like, I got the CLI flag to work, I got the backend to work, I got everybody. No Easter eggs? What the? Stop what you're doing. Go back 2 more sprints and build your Easter egg before we get to ship this thing, right? But I don't think that is because fun is never a goal, right? For developer product. Fun is always a goal for games.
Right.
And I always found it interesting Because, there's so many times where I work on a game, we built like more than half of it, and we just had to kill the whole thing because it wasn't fun.
Uh-huh.
And then you start doing things a little differently. And this is actually why I thought it was interesting. Like products today don't put fun first. A lot of them. Some do. And you can actually easily tell it. Like just the way you think, how they look at the details,
And there's actually a lot more room today when you're building software to put in Easter eggs, right? Like I can imagine having an Easter egg in your Helm chart or an Easter egg in your Terraform or maybe even an entire microservice or an entire container as part of a deployment that is an Easter egg. There's so many places that you can plug those in.
Yeah.
But it's not as common as it used to be. But yeah, maybe it should. Maybe fun should be part of software development. Maybe you should bring back the fun.
Yeah, maybe. I work on Docker containers before, and that layer, you don't want to have an Easter egg causes buffer overflow, and then suddenly a big vulnerability open up just because of you, right?
Yeah.
That layer is scary. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I wouldn't call a vulnerability an Easter egg unless someone maliciously put it in there intentionally. Like if you're just adding bad code, that's not being professional. But if you're adding something that is reliable, it is a good element of software, but it has a different purpose. It adds more color. It adds flavor and fun. Maybe we should. Joel, what do you think?
I was trying to remember the name of there used to be a DNS provider. I think it might have been DNS Simple, where you could do some command on it and it would play music or change colors. I just was trying to Google for it to figure out which one it was, but
I remember that.
I failed so far. Was it DNS Simple or was it, you just remember it existing?
I just searched Google, and I think the first one is like Cloudflare talk about a DNS Easter egg, RRDNS. You can actually query a DNS query, and it will give you some weird thing back. There's some chaos protocol. I don't know, it's interesting, yeah. There's a particular one you can query and gives you like a very interesting response.
I want to give another angle for Easter eggs. They can actually be used to prove intellectual property.
Oh, yeah.
So let's say someone copies off your code. They might not be aware of the Easter egg, but its existence there as part of the software running elsewhere would be a clear indication that this is your code. This is actually used to be a pattern with map developers. It's called the paper cities or paper towns, where you'd create a map. So you'd add a fake town as part of the map. So if someone copies off your map, it will show because that place isn't real and you copied it off. And same thing can Easter egg can serve in that way as well. And I think maybe, and then even a fourth angle to this is what's the place that we as human developers take with code development now that more and more machine learning agents are writing code. So maybe this is also a way to kind of express our humanity and the code development word that is quickly being swallowed or at least being shaken or disrupted by all this machine-generated code.
We need to write a plugin for GitHub Copilot that just injects Easter eggs.
I think that we will express our humanity by pushing bugs to production. That will express humanity in code for the next century.
Also, sad. Robots take all our jobs, and we're just all meaningless and useless. We can all make jokes only, right? Entertainment and creativity is down to a level of Easter eggs. The rest is all done.
Until they deep fake us all, and then the deep fakes are more interesting than who we actually are. And then that's when I think that we're going to see a huge rise in in-person events. I've been thinking a lot about it lately, like what it would take from a technology standpoint, because there's hundreds of hours of me interviewing people and video, like high quality video from multiple angles. I was like, well, at what point will I be able to have a deep fake running the interview and the individual on the other part of the interview does not know it's a deep fake?
I don't know about that, but I already have my own little Joel that I've created and running on my laptop, and I always tell it good night before I go to sleep. It's my own little thing, and so thanks for all those hours of content that enabled me to generate that.
Wait, can you give me the Joel too? I want a Clippy I can talk to.
Hey! I want some licensing fees. Come on.
Yes,
This
no
Joel thing looks cool, sir. Yeah.
So that's a whole topic. Like, who owns that Joel? Is that intellectual property that you own? Is that something that I own because I did the training for that model? That's a tough question that we need to answer.
I've got maybe part of an answer to it. So in the United States and in the UK, last time I checked, which was 3 years ago with a lawyer, when there is a known interview conducted, this is a known interview, we both are aware it's an interview and it's being recorded.
Right.
Each party that participated in the interview owns a license to that content that they can commercialize independently of each other. So I don't know how it is in every other country, but that's why when you see the individual on the evening news talking about the alligator on the golf course, that they're not getting royalties from the advertisers at commercial break.
Well, that's good. But still, it's still kind of hard to translate that into what that means for the model and the content that the model generates. Like,
well, it means that if it's learning, like if we're having this conversation and we all walk away, the only 4 parties that own the rights to this conversation and this intellectual property is the 4 of us, right?
Right.
Then anything that's training on that is training on something it doesn't own.
So what if I train it? So you said, oh, the model that I have trained now on your previous sessions, that's not good. I can't use that.
Yeah.
But if I use, so I just need to invite you on more episodes. That's the bottom line here.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, there needs to be a check written. And then
No, I think it's worth quite a lot to me. So we'll settle that after the show. And I actually think this is a good point to transition to our second fact. And our second fact for this episode is Joel's fact. Take it away, Joel.
Okay. All right. So I get to interview a lot of people. One of the people that I've gotten to interview is named Taher. He is commonly referred to as the godfather of SSL. So huge security guy. He's currently the CTO over at Salesforce. And he informed me that 90% of security breaches are because of bad passwords.
Classic. When you say bad passwords, is like the quality of the password itself, the way the password is saved or managed in the end solution, or something else.
The phrase chosen for the password. So password 1234, things of that nature.
So we should encourage people. So here's the question. Should we encourage people to come up with better passwords, or should we join the passwordless revolution? There's like a bazillion, no offense to anyone, bazillion passwordless authentication companies nowadays. They're claiming that we should get rid of passwords. What is the right approach?
Well, when I asked him what the one takeaway was, because he's, Mr. Security, he said 2FA. But I also learned that with this passwordless solution, one of the things that they use is like the failed DRM technology that was placed on the chips for licensing content. So it's kind of relevant. You know how iTunes, it knows you have the song. And so they were actually using that chipset for a lot of the basis of the passwordless technologies.
As maybe some of our audience know, Gabriel and I were working in Permit, which is part of the IAM space. So we're kind of coming in after authentication happens, after passwords come in, and we're really relying on the fact that you did your work well with the authentication provider. So maybe we should start doubting that. Maybe we should do like more checks as part of the authorization stage, not just rely on what people do in the authentication stage. What do you folks think of that?
Yeah, it's such a big topic, right? Like how do you actually secure everything everywhere with all the right stuff? The more control you have, the more freedom people feel like, right? That's why you feel this is, in large companies, you have to have a pager with this key knob with a bunch of phone apps and all that stuff, where people feel like they can't do their job anymore, or barely can do their job anymore. But at the same time, you are so much. So there was always a trade-off between checks and balances. Right? I really feel like the way we can only improve is when the usability of all these checks are so transparent, right? It's like, I don't even know you're happening behind it. Like, I don't always enforce all kind of controls. I don't always, because it's just so tough to say, oh, well, everyone should have all the right stuff everywhere. It's just so hard. I don't know. I feel like it's been it's very tough because, when you're a startup, especially, like, you can't really implement all kinds of right security from day one. And maybe it doesn't matter because you have a lot more people control, right? Or there's a lot more radius control. You can control other things. So when you grow organization much more complex, the touch points become so much more larger. But you can't just add all kind of security stuff, right? Security teams are also having a lot of trouble knowing what is the right things to do, what budgets we use, what are the ways we slow down our businesses. And so I don't know. I feel like authorization is, feels like a solved problem. But what's also very interesting, there's so many more authorization companies still coming up than authentication
companies, I think,
right.
or authorization.
Actually, authentication companies are actually a lot more popping up than authorization companies. And I'm seeing a whole lot more of those still, even though we thought that's more of a solved problem. It hasn't. I think it's because not just the core functionality like OAuth and stuff like that is not there. It's already there. It's just so hard to do them. It's so hard to implement everywhere. It's so hard to actually put them everywhere. That doesn't feel like you're adding so much, either work to implement or work to actually get them to be used everywhere. I think actually that's one big part of the equation of why it's really hard to add everything.
I think there's also two sides of the equations here, and both are hard. There's the challenges that you have as a vendor building the software and making it secure, and as a developer actually building it and putting in your professional stake and making sure that it is built with security in place. And there's the responsibility of the end users and organizations building this. Like, I think this kind of comes up almost directly from Joel's fact. Like, I can build the best solution in the world and make it as secure as I want. But if you as a customer put in a stupid password and share it with everyone in the world, I won't be able, or at least it'll be very hard for me to protect your account. So there's a fine line here also between putting in the effort into making the account secure and also making it not cost effective. Because also if I put too much, kind of like what you said, Tim, if I put too much hurdles and defenses and friction points in the product, people will end up with actually a less secure environment. I can give a sub-fact here from my time working in the Ministry of Defense. They built a very complex system to filter in content coming into the air-gapped network. Everyone had to go through a special station that would scan all the files and elements being imported into the secure network. But that process was very cumbersome. It took a lot of time. So what people end up doing, they ended up plugging in USBs and other things into other parts in the network. Just because so I did the first port, I scanned it with the antivirus, so it's fine. I'll just plug this USB here. And without meaning to do any harm, those users basically subverted the entire security model that a lot of energy was put into designing it. So there's a lot of friction in balance.
Yeah, it's forcing the security community to understand user experience, right? If you want these things to be used, they have to work in the flow of how humans will work. There's that famous graphic that shows the sidewalk and it's at a 90-degree angle and it says user design, and then there's the path that's walked over the grass to get to the other side faster, and that says user experience. And it's like, yeah, the users will do what they need to do to achieve the outcome, because at the end of the day, we want to go live our lives, have our family and our friends and our kids and our experiences, and technology is just these tools that we're using to help move life forward so that we can go do the things that we want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. This actually was thinking about like the facts. I was actually one thing to talk about. I don't know, is it right now the time? But anyway, I can think about the facts.
Yeah, it's your time.
Yeah.
But, this is my opinion, not a fact, but I feel like this is what I see. The podcast about shift left, right? We're talking about what shift left is supposed to be, especially security products, means I'm moving not just security teams post after the fact, right? Catching things, monitoring things. It's shifting left typically means the developers, right? Or the people that are actually the ones building the products. This might be, analysts or data scientists or developers. They're the ones actually creating or, writing the script, writing developer. All the shift left companies are saying, we got to go there, right? Look at Sneak, look at all the players. Those security teams are overwhelmed. Let's move to the left. Anyway, to me, I think the actual thing I've noticed over and over is that shift left companies most of them aren't great when it comes to developers, even though they're meant for developers.
Yeah.
And I say this because I'm a developer. I'm not a security person per se. My whole career has been a developer,
Right.
Working on open source code. I was a founder before, selling stuff into the enterprise for SRE context. And now I'm an investor, right? Doing a lot of developer related products.
Yeah.
And when I do see a security company, it has to have a developer angle. That's typically how I view it. And they'll come to me and say, hey, we're a shift left company. We're here to have the security team have what they want, but the developers also have what they want, right? So it's great. And then you look at all the security benefits and it was, okay, what is it for developers? Oh, we have a VS Code plugin. They can do this and that. Oh, we have a GitHub action. They can do this and that. And so this is a shift left product. And I asked them, like, well, no developers want to do that. No developers would like to do that. Like, why do I have a VS Code plugin to give me all kinds of potential issues
Errors.
and stuff that doesn't matter to me at all?
I want less of that, not more.
Yeah, it's like,
yeah.
But it intuitively speaking, I feel like a lot of shift left products, or maybe even the founders are building shift left products, they're not developers that they didn't know the day-to-day at all.
Yeah.
That's what I noticed. Not all of them, a lot of them. And so they end up building products that they realize it's hard to sell to security teams because there's so many products. So guess what? One easy way to differentiate is just shift left. But I don't feel like that's actually the best way to just do that. I think it's the right mindset in some way, but also they're not thinking about the product in the developer's mind and hands a lot. And that's the biggest debate I have with founders is I don't think developers will like that. And they don't know, developers should, and then we just go back and forth. And obviously it's subjective, but I do feel like shift left has somehow become too much of a trend that seems like every security company now, especially new ones, are all trying to be shift left just because it seems like it's the new hot category to be in.
Yeah.
But I do think that anybody that want to build in this category has to actually know what developers actually want.
I can't agree more. I think if you're building anything for developers, you need the empathy for developers. You need to understand what your audience wants. Just like with any product, if you don't understand your end customer, everyone's gonna have a bad time. You as a vendor, you as a developer, and most importantly, the end customer. And there is such a thing. There's also a parallel culture that is also trending right next to shift left, and that's DevX, developer experience. Mm-hmm. So just like before, we talked about customer experience and how that would deviate from what you're building if you're not building it right. Same thing goes for developers. You can try and force their hands all day long, but it won't cut it. So you need to bake that in when you're building anything for developers. And I'd say that also goes for just building code that you'll share with your colleagues. Like if you're writing a piece of code and you want your colleagues to use it the other day, or do you want them to code review it, or you want them to be able to use it as a different part of the project, unless you think of how they're going to use it, you might get a lot of WTFs as part of the code review or when they use it. So I think empathy is a critical part for software development. And maybe that's something kind of an encouraging point, connecting back to that all of that automated machine-generated code coming in. So maybe as developers, maybe that's still part of our edge, building code that is actually comes with a good developer experience and not just runs as code. And I think this would actually be a great point to move to our third fact. And Tim, you're already on a roll. So the third fact is yours. Go ahead.
So my third fact, because I talk to founders all day long, especially interview a lot of open source founders in my podcast. This reminds me of, there's one TED Talk I think I watched before from Bill Gross, basically the single biggest reason why startups succeed. And he analyzed all kinds of reasons, but the number one reason he finally concluded is timing, right? Everybody kind of argues about product, market, all kinds of different things, but timing was the number one reason why startups actually succeeded, which is interesting. We have so much debates about what's important when it comes to being successful as a startup. We have a lot of debates about culture. We have a lot of debates about how good the product is. We should do this and that. But timing is actually something you can't really change, right?
Unless you have a time machine.
Yeah. Or I think this has always been a debate between investors, right? Should you invest in the team or invest in the market, right? There has been a debate between that. Like, do you find just the best team and just let them do whatever they want? I don't care as much. Do a little bit of homework, but I don't care as much as because this is such a great team to execute it before. They would just do something great, right? Versus trying to figure out actually the market of what they're saying and think it's actually a really good market, a good timing for it, and decide for that. Because obviously, if both are so obvious, every VC will want it, and it's going to be a crazy round, right? As early stage investors, your goal is to try to see things before others don't. That's why you can actually be non-consensus as right, is the way people think about it, is you can actually be early where not everybody has concluded that's the right thing to do yet, but you're right. So you actually came in with the right, on an early stage, actually on a good price, would actually have a huge outcome. That's how you make your profit in some way. For a lot of founders, sometimes they too much emphasize on some particular things, but it's always good to remind ourselves that timing is something you cannot change, right? But what you work on, what market you do stuff with, you can change, man. But if you try to make something happen in a market that the timing isn't right, there's nothing to do. Generally speaking.
That's kind of grim. So I want to ask you, Tim, as an investor, how do you decide if the timing's right?
Oh man, that's hard. Like if I'm up right all the time, I'm probably a lot more richer than I am, right, or whatever. It's funny because it's not going to be easy. I think we all rely on a lot of signals, and these signals might come from the news, might come from Twitter, might come from research papers I read, might come from a lot of conversation I have with different people. So I think we all have different experiences and touch points. As an investor, you scroll Hacker News all day long, you look at products all day long, you look at Twitter all day long, where you talk to a lot of your portfolio founders, you talk to also a lot of new founders.
I think that's a really interesting topic also from the single individual contributor developer perspective. Like if I'm now switching jobs and I want to join a company, how do I know when's the right time to join a company? And of course, which company is part of that line of thinking. I remember that my wife, also a software engineer, she interviewed for Magic Leap.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time, Magic Leap was the most cool company with the best investors and the brightest future and the greatest perks, and it was the shiniest star in the sky. And I think even less than half a year later, it became a pitiful thing that no one wanted to touch. And she got accepted, and she ended up not going there because for other reasons, she followed her heart. She went to work in a healthcare-oriented software company. But it was a really interesting dilemma at the time. And as you say, Tim, time was a critical factor. Like, just wait a couple of months, and that jewel becomes basically garbage. So I think this is relevant both for entrepreneurs, founders, and for the developers just looking for their next path in their career.
I knew Magic Leap was going to fail when I first found them. Their homepage was amazing. They had these beautiful designers with these incredible renderings, and I was just enamored by it. And then I was doing media going around doing podcasts at conferences, and there was a special Magic Leap experience which I could get access to, so I'd do some media on it. And I haven't talked about them ever on the podcast, but I went to the Magic Leap experience and I put it on, and within 30 seconds I just started laughing, and my videographer goes, why are you laughing? I go, because these investors are screwed. Because like all the headlines were like, we raised $1 billion and everything. And because it was so far from what they set this expectation to be to what they could actually deliver on your first hands-on experience, it was so far away that I couldn't see them getting to their next stage of capital, their next round, or their next iteration. I don't know if they're alive today, but
not really.
Their next iteration with, yeah. And then they tried to take a developer route, right, where they opened up a bunch of developer kits and tried to put it in the hands of people. I think that was like their death throes of, maybe if we put this platform out to the community, someone will figure out how to do something correct with it.
Save us, someone, please.
Yeah.
Actually, so a few thoughts here, just hearing those two, because I think it's important to think about like, why do you want to join a startup, right? And also talking about like, being so bold and doing something big. And anyway, I'll maybe start with a comment for Joel too, right? Because a lot of these products, they always feel early when you're trying them on, but the hope is they can iterate to something.
Yeah.
But for sure, I think for Magic Leap, it's so hard to iterate. Team is already large. Product's so hard to, it's a hardware, right? You can't go that fast, right? And you have to think about mass production, all that stuff, right? It's not just a one machine only. And so I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why that fails with that. But, going back to like, how does someone think about joining a startup? Like, if you're going to try to be the perfect crystal ball machine, like, oh, this one will totally work, so I'm going to join that startup.
Yeah, that's not a good way. You're right.
You'll be disappointed as well. In some way, Mesosphere was kind of like Magic Leap in some way, because we were so hot back in 14 and 15. We rise to a lot of like big valuation, grew lots of people, and then just suddenly the company maintained the D2IQ now and doing Kubernetes stuff, but it's just never been the same hype as before. But I feel like I really changed my career joining Mesosphere, because part of the reason is, you're part of a really crazy growing community and a market, right? Back in 14, container wasn't a thing. When I joined Mesosphere, I never heard of Docker, but Docker suddenly just grew so fast. And I was at the core, at the heart of it, right? Docker, Core OS, and us, we're at the heart of it. So we basically got to know everybody. All the core people around that community. And we're working, and you can also notice as well, the best companies also have the best people.
Yeah.
And you don't really know how to quantify or qualify best people, but when you see it, you can feel it. Oh, wow. People that invented QuickTime is next to me, right? The guy that worked on that kind of paper, I heard it so many times, is next to me, right? And it's like, there was so much good people that you're just like, well, I'm very honored to be able to be a coworker with. And I always tell people that those startups, those kind of companies, you shouldn't blink on joining, because no matter what the outcome is, they're all going to go off crazy places. They're all going to start different kind of companies. You're in good company, basically. You're in good company, because no matter what happens, right? You're gonna forever remember, and you're always gonna have a part of a special connection with. There's a reason really great people want to be working in the same place, and I think that magic, you can't rebuild that. A lot of large companies say we have good people, best people. You can, relatively speaking, maybe in your org or in your whole company, but startups, there's a special magic to it.
Yeah.
When everybody has not cared about red tape, not cared about politics, and actually want to achieve something really, and they're so good as well. I forever, those relationships and people and all that network are so much more deeper than any other large company I've joined in the past. So yeah.
I had a similar situation with, I worked in a company called Antigua, where we also basically did containers before containers were a thing, but with a horrible go-to-market. But some cool other companies came out of that. Logs.io, Solo.io, Permit.io. So it's cool to be part of a cohort, though I think I would have preferred to be also in a good company that actually produced a product people want. On that note, I think it's the perfect time to move to our fourth fact. And our fourth fact is from Gabriel. Gabriel, take it away.
Yeah. Okay. So my fact, I actually try for a real fun fact, which kind of relate to software. So in 2014, there was a Tinder match in Antarctica. And that led me to think about the edge cases we saw in our software. So we saw user, we saw what user doing, what user was doing. And then sometimes we understand that there is an edge case that we didn't take care of, or we may want to take care of. And that's also a question of balancing the software engineer, how much I'm worrying about edge cases from a lot of angles. Can be from security angle, from performance angle, observability, analytics. And that led me to think, I mean, if I used to work on a product called the Misto and later Cortex XOR, which kind of invent a category on the security operation control room. So it's like automate and orchestrate all the manual security, cybersecurity tasks. And at some point of time, we started to see a very strange names for automations and playbooks and stuff like that. And then we understood that security engineers took the automation engine into some, interesting scenarios like open doors, control some smart appliances and stuff like that. And then we started to do it ourselves because we have free instances of XOR as much as we want.
That's cool.
So edge cases.
I think it's a different angle to what we talked about before with the customer experience or the developer experience. Like, you give people a product, especially developers, they'll use it in ways that you don't expect, and do weird things with it. But the question is, should we try and predict this? Should we try and kind of be defensive on how people would actually use a product and try to cover all the edge cases? Or maybe it's actually okay that we don't cover all these cases and let things grow organically. Like, though I kind of wonder, like, what those people in Antarctica, like, did they expect when they opened up Tinder that someone else would show up? Because usually there aren't people there. So it's amazing that the service actually worked.
Yeah, so the man said that the first thing he told the women that she should hide it because he doesn't know that his bosses will know that he used the internet for that. Because that's an expensive thing to use broadband in Antarctica.
I haven't even thought of that.
And he doesn't want that his bosses to know that he is using Tinder instead of, do the satellite phone calls.
Yeah, well, now with Starlink, they can date all they want in Antarctica.
Yeah.
So, Joel, Tim, do you have stories of your own from your career running into unique edge cases?
Well, I was going to say that the hard part about that discussion, what we're having, is that the answer to that question changes as the company matures.
Uh-huh.
Right? So the earlier the company focusing on achieving the outcome for the customer is first and foremost, you only have enough resources to achieve doing that so you can get someone to hand you money for the outcome. And then it's definitely not a science as much as it is an art of making those decisions along the way as you grow revenue and teams and people on what type of edge cases you cover or what type of security that you have along the way. So that's one of the things I have found the hardest part about going to experts like we do on the show is that I always have to figure out what's the context of the advice that they're giving. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from I'm at 5,000 people scaling to 10, or am I at 1 going to 3? And so that's what makes the whole advice thing really, really, really hard. And so the way I've gotten around that is to figure about principles. Like, what principles do you care about and what principles do you emphasize? Because those become your habits and ultimately those affect what your decisions are.
Yeah. I like this to say, like, advice is definitely more context specific than not, right?
Mm-hmm.
What about edge cases? Like I mentioned Mesos and Kubernetes, right? I always have favorite memories of those. And a lot of people ask me why Mesos failed. Maybe that's not a relevant topic to you guys, but a lot of people back in 14, 15, like Mesos was definitely much larger than Kubernetes.
Right.
And people now you never heard of Mesos at all. Like, what the hell is Mesos, right? And it's funny because when you think about edge cases, this is what I remember, because Mesos was used in production Twitter first. And Twitter has a lot of nodes. They have literally physical 80,000 nodes clusters or something more beyond that. That's all running Mesos. And so some way, if you're building a cluster management software, you want it to be used in large cases because now you've proven you work at scale. You can go sell to large banks and sell to large enterprises, right? For a lot of enterprise software vendors, it's kind of like I'm unproven until I am, right? And so I'm going to go and continue to kind of grow my users base. But in some points, growing too focused on the large customers can also kill you. And I think I actually attribute part of that Mesos death to that because Mesos was great, at scale. And we have so much edge cases we're fixing all the time just because it's run at that scale. Like a simple TCP socket connection that we're doing heartbeats. Just doing heartbeating in an 80,000 nodes cluster is not trivial. You have to think about all kinds of crazy stuff, like all kind of cascading failures, all kind of like thundering herds, all kinds of whatever, right? Too much nodes coming up, just doing our ping, you kill a node. Just 80,000 connections right front. You can't do that, right? You have to actually figure out what is the right way to propagate, what is the right timeouts, So just dealing with a small thing in a cluster management software is very, very tough. And so we're fixing edge cases all day long on stuff probably like 90-something% of people don't care about. 99% of people don't care about. And the other flip side of that is it makes adding any new feature into Mesos super difficult, right? And Kubernetes, I think, because it came in later, actually have a much more easier time because it doesn't work at scale at all. Like literally I saw it when it was like 3 lines of code or 10 lines of code, like something so useless. It was so simple. It barely works at all. But because it was starting from a very scratch point of view, it didn't have to work at scale. There's a lot more freedom to iterate. And they won the community through that. It was much more open of a community. It didn't have to think about, does it work at Twitter or Apple or whatever already. And also, of course, a lot of different factors too, like Golang versus C++ and all kind of stuff. But edge cases actually kill the Mesos in some way because we have to fix them. And we spend all the time and we cannot easily take patches in from a community. And that just slow spiraled us to death versus some other community just completely wide open, made a lot more growth. And, you see that sort of like the effect here. And it leads into very different outcomes. So I think a lot of startups, I don't get excited when they say I'm going to work with a large company when they're a pre-seed or C stage. It's like, well, good luck. Not saying you never should do that, but it doesn't just come for free. Even though they might have a much bigger contract for you and all that stuff, but it's going to change your company and also make everything else much more harder.
Yeah, it can actually, edge cases can actually kill you, not just your software, it can actually kill your company. I think that's a very interesting point. I think we're coming close to the end of our time, and I'd love to hear from both you, Joel and Tim. What are you working on today? What are you excited about? Starting with you, Joel.
Yeah, so the first 200 episodes we did of the show was just a hobby, something I had built a financial software company, exited that, and used the money to start the show. So just a hobby. And then after that, we figured out how to grow revenue and built it up. We have just under 20 people. We definitely did go through the capital raising phase, Tim, and they definitely invested in us because of the team, not because of the market, because we were a leadership training software at the time. And then we pivoted to the podcast and advertising. So they were very happy that we were able to make that transition during COVID because everybody slashed their leadership budgets in COVID. So from there, we grew that for 3 years and just did sponsorships on the podcast. And at some point about 16 months ago, people came to us and said, hey, we've sponsored your show, several years in a row. We love it. We love the experience. And we're thinking about having a podcast. Can you make us a podcast? I said, well, if we do it like we do Modern CTO, then sure, because we already know how to hire it. We were several hundred episodes in. We knew everything about it. And so we did. So we've taken on about 20 shows in the past 15 months. And now that's what we do. We build studios and build shows for people as Pro Series Media. So that's the evolution of it, from hobby podcast to podcast production company. It makes sense in hindsight, but going through it, I never woke up one day and was like, today I'm going to start a podcast production company.
It grew organically, like the best things in life.
Yeah, we just listened to the
Awesome.
customers. Yeah, actually, to Tim's point, because he's in an investment world, the first time somebody asked, I said, I don't know. And then what I did was I went and pulled a report from my customers for the past year or two, and I sorted by the highest dollar value amount, and then I deleted the people I didn't like working with, which left me with this top 20%, I called it, of customers. And then I had meetings with each one of them, and we got our first 6 deals out of that. So after I kept hearing people say, yeah, we're thinking about a podcast, I said, okay, it's worth us actually pursuing this. And I think we picked up 6 or 7 shows before we even had a website. And at one point, someone came to us and said, hey, I just referred somebody to you, but they go to moderncto.io and it's just a tech leadership podcast. And I'm trying to explain to them that you guys make podcasts. And then I figured, oh, well, we need to make a brand and make a website and start selling them as Pro Series Media.
I highly recommend. I as I said before, I had the pleasure of being a guest on one of those podcasts, and top-notch stuff. Tim, moving to you.
Yeah. A podcast production company sounds much more sexier than what I'm doing. Anyway, I started a VC fund 3 years ago. I was angel investing. I was a founder. We got a small exit to Cloudera, and I just really enjoy working with founders. And I really feel like when it especially comes to infrastructure investing, there's not a lot of like technical founders helping each other in a way. So I kind of wanted to carry that DNA into this, and yeah, I had so much fun. I decided to actually go double down in this full time. So raise some funds and really just focus on a lot of infrastructure, early stage investing, pre-seed and seed focus.
What?
And a part of this, also created a podcast called Open Source Startup Podcast. That's been going 80-something episodes now.
Nice.
Also created a Discord channel called Yet Another Infra Group, YIG, in some way. You can go to yaig.dev. We're about 2,000 infra engineers and founders now, growing really strong. And we just do hot takes around infrastructure all day long. So if that's your thing, feel free to join us. But yeah, that's kind of the kind of stuff we're doing.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's cool to see your journey into the dark side, Tim. And I'll tell our audience that if you didn't catch it from listening to this episode, Tim is really a pleasure to talk to, and that's especially rare with VCs. Someone that actually talks to you eye level and that also actually understand what you're talking about when you're talking about tech. That's rare and valuable. So also here, I highly recommend. Folks, really thank you for joining us on this episode. I had a blast, and I'm sure our audience has as well. And hope to chat with you more next time. And to our listeners, looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
I think this is the perfect time to wrap up the show. If you liked this podcast, tell your friends about it. If you didn't like it, tell your enemies about it.